So in its crude iteration, this allegation, let me just state it in its crude iteration, at least 17 South African citizens, mostly young men aged between 20 and 39, have reportedly joined mercenary forces in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and are now said to be stranded in the war-torn Donbas region of Ukraine. So that's the crude iteration of it, but I'll tell you why I keep emphasizing that. According to the presidency, these men were lured by promises of lucrative contracts and now find themselves in serious danger. President Cyril Ramaphosa has ordered an investigation into how these young men were recruited, condemning the exploitation of vulnerable citizens. Let's unpack all of it. I'm joined by defense analyst Helmoed Heitman, who joins me now for that conversation. Helmoed, I keep saying calling them mercenaries is the easy, crude way of stating it. But as we are learning each and every day, there are complexities that may have to do with recruitment under false pretenses. How much do we know about this situation and how these men found themselves in the Donbas region? Do they fit a clear-cut definition that says these are mercenaries?
I don't think they do. I think if they'd gone there of their own free will to join the Russian army, and it seems they are in the Russian army, of their own free will, and were being paid more than your typical Russian soldier is paid as a salary, they would clearly be mercenaries. If they're being paid all the Russian military salaries, you could argue whether they're mercenaries or just doing it for cause. But in this case, either way, they seem to have been caught up in something that they hadn't planned. The overriding story appears to be that they were lured to Russia with an offer of a job and a good salary, and then found themselves signing documents in Russian that they didn't understand and wound up in the army. There was also one report that said that actually the MKP had sent them over for bodyguard training, and then they wound up stuck in the Russian army. Either way, that doesn't make them mercenaries, that makes them victims. If they didn't go there voluntarily, then they were shanghaied, basically. Or, like the bad old days of the Royal Navy when they had press gangs, they took people off the street and stuck them onto a warship. So there we have a situation where the government does need to do its best to get them out of there.
So what is the context, Helmoed, within the Russia-Ukraine conflict that makes it even possible for us to be talking about potential mercenary activity either from this country or other countries as well? Is that part of the context of what's going on in that conflict at the moment?
Look, yes. In fact, both countries seem to have foreigners serving in their armed forces. In the case of Ukraine, it seems to be primarily volunteers, a lot of Americans, but some others too. In the case of Russia, there are people who've been volunteered by their government, like the North Koreans. And there also seem to be people from Africa and elsewhere that have been duped into going to Russia by a job offer or a place at a university, and then wind up serving in the army. I know the Kenyans, for instance, have complained about that, and a couple of other countries. Others have also been lured to Russia with a job offer, not being told their job is to manufacture UAVs, drones, which makes them sit in a drone factory, which is a target for Ukrainian strike. The problem, I think, there is that Russia in particular, it's not they don't have a shortage of people, they're not Russians. But President Putin and his government do not want to go for full mobilization because that would rather underline the fact that the war has not gone as was intended and that they're facing a problem. So they'd rather use foreigners wherever they can to fill the gap. Also, foreigners who get killed, well, that doesn't make the newspapers in Russia. They don't get buried somewhere in Russia. It doesn't affect morale.
Yeah.
So I think what's happening is, and particularly Africa, of course, most of Africa has very high unemployment rates, particularly among the youth. And you go to somebody in pretty much any African country, including South Africa, and you offer them, I think the one figure that was mentioned was $4,000.
Yeah. Well,
$4,000 is a hell of a lot of money in rand. And if you're unemployed and don't have any particular skills, that sounds very attractive until you wind up sitting in a trench somewhere in the rain.
Sure. Helmoed, because of time, I have to leave it there. Thank you for your time and your insights this afternoon. That's Helmoed Heitman, defense analyst.